this is Karina, and you're listening to Bold, Brown and British, a weekly podcast where we discuss what it means to be a brown person in a Western world. We've spoken about colorism, third culture identity, and dating, amongst many others on this podcast. So if this sounds like the type of content that you want to hear, please subscribe to us on Apple Podcast, iTunes, Stitcher, or wherever you get your podcasts from. You can also message us on Instagram. The handle is @BoldBrownAndBritish, or drop us an email via our website at www.boldbrownbritish.com. So without further ado, let's get on with this week's episode.
You know what's funny? I had a completely different topic lined up for this month. Something a little softer, a little sillier, maybe unpacking brown girl joy, or a cheeky drag of Auntie WhatsApp conspiracy theories. I was ready, samosas. The mic was hot. But then life, in its usual Britain being Britain way, handed us a big, juicy lemon. And you know what we do when that happens, right? We don't make lemonade. We make chutney. Sticky, complex, unexpectedly emotional, and best served with a side of righteous fury. So welcome back to the Bold, Brown and British podcast, where we stir the pot, spill the tea, and never ever let the government gaslight us into silence. So here's a question for you, my sweet samosas. How long does it take to prove we belong? 5 years? 10? A lifetime? Or if you're brown, forever? Because with the UK government's new immigration white paper, the answer seems to be longer. Much longer. And also, don't get too comfortable. So buckle up. Today, we're unpacking what this policy shift really means for migrants, for brown communities, and for the very idea of what it means to belong in Britain. This is government policy blueprint that could and will reshape the lives of millions. Brown ones, immigrant ones, ours. So grab your tea, your samosa, or your oat milk iced latte, and let's talk about what all this really means. The headlines. What's in the new white paper? All right. So what exactly is in this white paper? Well, let's start with the headline. The residency requirement for permanent settlement, aka indefinite leave to remain, is going from 5 to 10 years. 10 years. That's a decade of proving you're worthy to stay. That's double the current requirement. For many people, especially those already living, working, studying, and raising families here, this feels like a home office whispering, "We see you, but not quite yet. Keep dancing and maybe we'll clap." Now, if that wasn't enough of a plot twist, they're also tightening skilled worker visa requirements, tweaking visa rules again, and cracking down on so-called abuse in the immigration system, all wrapped up in the government's favourite justification, protecting British jobs and ensuring fairness. I mean, come on, we've heard this soundtrack before, haven't we? Let's zoom in on that 10-year rule for a sec, because honestly, that is massive. Let's say you move here for work, you build a life, you pay your taxes, you do your weekly shop at Tesco, develop a romantic attachment to the word cheers, and even get emotionally invested in that fate of Bake Off contestants. But none of that matters, because under the new rule, the clock resets. You now have to wait 10 full years before you can apply to stay permanently. That's not just a policy change, that's a philosophical shift. It says we don't quite trust you yet, not even after 5 years of proof. Samosas, let me ask you, what does that say about the value of immigrant lives in Britain? I'll tell you what it says. It says your contribution is transactional. You can live here, you can build here, you can give birth in a British hospital, but until 10 years are up, you're still a guest, an overstaying Airbnb tenant waiting for your host to stop hovering by the door. So who is this actually affecting? It's not the CEO arriving on a sponsored visa with a relocation package and 3 months of corporate housing. It's a nurse from the Philippines who's been patching up patients through COVID, the social care worker from Nigeria wiping tears and cleaning up messes in care homes, the software engineer from Pakistan who's building half the apps you use, the teacher from India who's keeping your kid from face planting into GCSE failure, and his students too, many of whom spend tens of thousands of pounds to study here, only to be told that rules have changed mid-degree. Imagine working hard, hoping to build a future here, and being met with a moving goalpost every year. The impact is not abstract, it's personal. These are our aunties, uncles, cousins, partners, best mates, and yes, probably a few of you listening right now. Here's where it gets juicy. The government says that these changes are about investing in domestic talent. Basically, let's stop depending on immigration and start training British workers instead. Cute, in theory, but in practice? The latest Labour government stats show that foreign-born workers make up a significant portion of the UK workforce, especially in key sectors like health, social care, hospitality, and tech. Translation: immigrants aren't taking jobs, they're doing the jobs that nobody else wants to do or are trained for. So this white paper isn't just about visas, it's about the real risk of staff shortages. Who's going to care for your nan in the care home when the migrant carers are pushed out? Who's going to fill hospital rotas when international doctors decide this isn't worth the hassle? You can't just wish up domestic skills like a Nando's order. Hi, yes, can I get one peri-peri British nurse, extra chain, ready in 5 minutes? Babes, it doesn't work that way. That's not how training and workforce development works. Let's go deeper. That's a very real emotional and psychological toll to this immigration game. 10 years of visa renewals, application fees that are eye-wateringly high, literally thousands of pounds, not including legal help, restrictions on travel, limited access to public funds, the constant anxiety that the next policy shift will pull the rug from under your feet. Do you know what it's like to live in limbo for a decade? To feel like you're always one form, one pavement, one no away from being uprooted. It's not bureaucratic, it's traumatic. And okay, what about the system being abused? Okay, yes, the Home Office loves to bring up the abuse of the system. And let's be clear, no one's denying that immigration systems need rules. Nobody's asking to open borders and chaos. But here's the thing, when you center the entire narrative around abuse, you criminalize everybody. You start treating every migrant as guilty until proven British. The white paper talks about strengthening enforcement, which often means ramping up surveillance raids and a general climate of fear. And again, who gets caught in that net? Brown people, black people, working class migrants, vulnerable folks who don't have legal teams or media coverage. It's a tale as old as empire, over-policing the very communities that build the country, and then acting shocked when those communities stop trusting the system. You know what this really exposes those samosas? Britain's never-ending identity crisis. This island has never quite made peace with its post-empire self. It still wants to be global Britain, attracting top talent and investment, but also fortress Britain, keeping up undesirables. Pick one, babes. You can't have both. You can't say diversity is our strength on Monday and drop a white paper on Tuesday that treats migrants like a burden. The question Britain still hasn't answered is, who gets to belong? And until we stop framing immigration purely as a problem to solve instead of the human story that it is, we're going to keep repeating the same cycle. What does it really mean in terms of detail? What does this paper say? And what can we do? So I asked some friends to explain exactly what these changes are and what they mean. Let's hear it from them.
You know, when I think about the British Asian families I know, so many stories start with a journey, don't they? Someone coming here for work or to study or, joining family.
Absolutely. It
Yeah.
really underlines how vital it is to keep up with the rules governing those journeys.
And right now, things are definitely changing in the UK's immigration system. Quite significantly, it seems.
They certainly are. We're going to take a deep dive today into the new proposals from the UK government. They're outlined in the May 2025 white paper called Restoring Control Over the Immigration System.
Yeah, and our aim really is to unpack what these changes actually mean.
Yeah.
Especially, we want to look at the impact on South Asian migrants, people already here maybe, or those thinking about coming for work or university.
Mm-hmm.
We've looked at quite a few sources, BBC News, The Guardian, also India Today, for specific perspectives, data from the Migration Observatory, and of course, the government's white paper itself.
Yeah, pulling those together gives us a pretty rounded picture, I think, of what's being proposed and what the knock-on effects might be.
Because look, for many of you listening, maybe with family links or community ties to South Asia, these kinds of policy changes, well, they naturally create a bit of uncertainty, don't they?
For sure.
So our goal with this deep dive is just to offer some clarity, focus on the key shifts and what they might mean in practice. Okay, so should we start with what seems like one of the biggest changes, the time it takes to get permanent settlement?
Yes, let's. The main proposal here is to increase the usual qualifying period for indefinite leave to remain, that's permanent settlement, basically from the current 5 years up to 10 years.
10 years. That's a really substantial jump.
It is.
And according to the BBC's reporting, this isn't just for new people applying in the future. They're considering applying it to people already in the UK.
That's right. It's subject to a public consultation, but yes, the intention seems to be to include those already on a pathway.
Wow. That must feel like the goalposts have massively shifted for people who've, already made plans based on 5 years.
Absolutely. The government's reasoning, as far as we can tell from the reporting, seems to stem from worries about a big rise in settlement and citizenship applications, linked to the higher immigration numbers we saw in the early 2020s.
So maybe a way to manage those numbers, spread them out over time?
That seems to be the thinking, yes.
But are there any ways around this? Any exceptions to the 10-year wait?
There are a couple of important ones mentioned. The current 5-year rule will still apply for non-UK partners and children of British citizens, so that's unchanged.
Okay, that's good to know.
And the white paper also sort of hints at potentially shorter routes for people who can show they've made significant contributions to the UK economy and society. But the details on how that contribution is that still needs to be fleshed out in the consultation.
Right, so still a bit vague on that front, but good to know there might be other pathways. Still, for someone who came here expecting 5 years, doubling that time must be incredibly unsettling. The BBC actually spoke to someone, Isa, who's been here 3 years.
Yes, and his words were really powerful, weren't they?
They were.
He described it as feeling like fraud and a betrayal. He and his wife, they came here with a very clear plan, expecting to settle after 5 years. Now that timeline is suddenly pushed way back.
And he's thinking of leaving, going to the U.S.
He is, yeah. Which really shows the kind of emotional impact, doesn't it? And the practical consequences, too. For people who started building lives here based on the rules as they were, it shifts the whole dynamic, maybe away from long-term integration towards more temporary stays.
It really hits home hearing stories like that. And it does make you wonder about how attractive the UK will seem if that long-term security feels less certain. The Migration Observatory pointed out that 10 years puts the UK in quite a restrictive camp compared to other high-income countries.
Yeah, alongside places like Switzerland and Japan, they said. It's interesting, though, the observatory also suggests this longer route might not actually cut overall migration numbers that much.
Oh, really? Why is that?
Well, one potential side effect they noted is it could actually increase home office income, because people will need to keep applying for visa renewals over that longer 10-year period.
Ah, okay, so there's a potential financial angle, too.
Yeah.
And, of course, being on a temporary visa for longer, that means waiting longer for the full rights that come with permanent settlement.
Exactly. You're waiting longer for that unrestricted right to live, work, study here, access certain benefits without restrictions. And it delays being able to apply for British citizenship, too, which is often, the final step for many in feeling fully settled and belonging.
So instead of that security after 5 years, it's a much longer wait. Okay, let's switch gears a bit. Another major area is the skilled worker visa route. What are the key changes proposed there?
Right. The big one here is about the required skill level. The plan is to raise the threshold back up to RQF level 6.
Which is degree level, basically.
Yes, degree level or equivalent. This reverses the change made previously to include jobs down to RQF level 3, which is more like A-level equivalent.
Okay, so RQF 3 to 5 might be things like, skilled trades maybe, electricians, that sort of thing, while RQF 6 is more graduate jobs.
That's broadly it, yes. Engineers, doctors, IT professionals often fall into RQF 6 and above.
So quite a significant tightening. What happens then to jobs that fall between RQF3 and 5? Can people still get skilled worker visas for those?
Well, the proposal is that visas for those roles will become time limited. And crucially, they'll only be available if the Migration Advisory Committee, the MAC, that independent body, identifies a specific domestic shortage in that role.
Ah, so it's not automatic anymore.
Not at all. And on top of that, industries wanting to hire from overseas for those roles will have to prove they're trying hard to recruit and train UK workers first. It signals a shift, doesn't it? Away from using immigration to fill specific, maybe lower paid shortages towards focusing purely on high skill, high wage migrants.
How might that impact the South Asian community specifically? We know people work across loads of different sectors.
Well, data from the Migration Observatory shows Indian workers are particularly numerous in IT and communications. That sector usually demands RQF6 skills anyway, so the direct impact there might be less severe.
Okay.
But, we need to think about other sectors too. Healthcare support roles, maybe some hospitality, construction trades, where South Asians are also employed, often in roles that might fall into that RQF 3 to 5 bracket. Those individuals, and anyone wanting to come for similar jobs in future, they could find it much harder.
And wasn't there something about scrapping the salary list, the shortage occupation list?
Yes, the immigration salary list, as it's now called. That's the list that gives a discount on the usual salary threshold for jobs deemed to be in shortage. The proposal is to abolish that list completely.
Right.
And then the MAC will review the overall salary requirements needed for a skilled worker visa, possibly considering if any specific sector adjustments are still needed, but without the automatic discount list.
Okay. What if you're already here, though? On a skilled worker visa for one of those RQF 3 to 5 jobs,
Yeah.
are you suddenly kicked out?
No, there are transitional arrangements planned. So if you already hold a skilled worker visa for an RQF 3 to 5 role, you should still be able to renew it, change jobs within that same skill level, even take on extra work under the rules that applied when you got your visa.
Sure. Okay.
But anyone applying new for a skilled worker visa or someone switching onto it from a different visa type, like a student visa,
Yeah.
they will have to meet the new RQF 6 or above requirement.
Right. Understood. Okay. Let's move on to social care. This is another area where there's a really big policy shift proposed, and one with particular relevance for the South Asian community, isn't it?
Yes, very much so. The government has announced plans to actually end overseas recruitment specifically for social care visas altogether.
End it completely. Why?
The stated reason is to tackle concerns about potential abuse and exploitation of overseas workers within the care sector. There have been reports and worries about that.
And according to India Today, this specific visa route, the health and care worker visa for social care roles, it's been used quite heavily by people from South Asia, especially India.
That's right. It's been a major pathway. So ending overseas recruitment for it is a huge deal.
What's the timescale? When does this happen?
Well, the white paper talks about a transition period running until 2028.
Mm.
During that time, people who are already here with the right to work in social care can still extend their visas. They can still switch employers within the UK care sector.
Okay, so some breathing room for those already here.
Yes, but the government also said they'll keep this transition period under review. So it doesn't feel entirely set in stone. Things could potentially change again.
And closing off this route, given how many South Asian workers, as India Today noted, have used it, Dr. Dora Olivia Vickle from the Work Rights Center raised concerns, didn't she, about people potentially ending up in a more precarious immigration situation, maybe more vulnerable to exploitation as the road closes.
That's a really critical point, yes. While the government talks about needing to reform the sector and attract more UK workers, which is, a valid long-term goal, there are immediate worries. Potential staffing gaps short-term, and real uncertainty for the overseas care workers currently here about their future in the UK.
Yeah, I mean, given the huge pressures already on the social care system, won't stopping overseas recruitment just make things even harder?
Yeah.
Potentially impact care quality? It seems a risky move.
It's certainly a major challenge for the sector to navigate.
Okay, let's talk about international students, another really significant group for UK immigration. What changes are coming their way, and for the university sponsoring them?
Right, several things here. One focus is on tightening up the basic compliance assessment, the BCA. That's how universities are judged on managing their international students, making sure they actually enroll, actually complete their courses.
How are they tightening it?
They're increasing the minimum pass mark for each part of the BCA by 5 percentage points. So, for example, a university might need to show, say, a 95% enrollment rate and maybe a 90% course completion rate to pass muster under the new rules.
There's more pressure on universities to make sure students stick with it and succeed.
Exactly. And linked to that, they're bringing in a new banding system, red, amber, green. It will rate universities based on how well they're doing on this BCA.
Like Ofsted ratings for schools, almost.
Sort of, yeah. The idea is more transparency, and it allows the government to target interventions at universities that are maybe struggling or falling behind. If a university is close to failing, they could face special action plans, maybe even limits on recruiting new international students.
Sounds like much closer oversight. Any other changes for students or universities?
A few others mentioned. There's going to be an agent quality framework. Recruitment agents overseas who find students for UK universities will have to sign up to this code of conduct.
Trying to ensure good practice there.
And universities will also need to show they're thinking about the local impact, things like pressure on housing, local services when deciding how many international students to recruit.
That's interesting, considering the wider community impact.
Also, the short-term study route, often used for English language courses, that's going to be reviewed to check the quality of the accrediting bodies.
Okay. And what about probably the biggest headline grabber for students, the graduate route visa?
Yes, the proposal is to shorten the length of the graduate route visa. Currently, it allows students to stay and work for 2 years after graduating 3 for PhDs. That standard 2 years is set to be cut down to 18 months.
Only 18 months. That's quite a reduction.
It is. And on top of that, the government said it's going to look into possibly introducing basically a tax on the income universities make from international student fees.
Wow. Okay, so shorter post-study work time, potentially higher costs trickling down. This could really affect decisions, couldn't it? Especially for Indian students, who India Today highlighted are a huge cohort here. Sanam Arora from NISA UK voiced concern about this causing anxiety.
Yes, she did. Understandably, there's worry among current students and those thinking of applying. They need clarity fast. That shorter graduate route, specifically, might make the UK feel less appealing if gaining decent international work experience afterwards is a key goal.
Definitely less time to find a sponsored job, for instance.
Exactly. And the potential levy on universities, who knows how that might play out in terms of fees or resources for students down the line.
Right, let's look at family migration next. Rules around bringing family members to the UK are also being reformed.
Yes, the white paper signals a pretty big overhaul here. A whole new family migration policy framework is promised before the end of the year. This will cover anyone living in the UK wanting to bring relatives over.
What's the main thinking behind this new policy? What are the goals?
The stated aims are ensuring relationships are genuine, trying to reduce forced marriage, and improving protection for domestic abuse victims. A key part seems to be a stronger emphasis on English language ability for dependents coming over.
English language skills. For integration, presumably.
That's the idea, to help people integrate effectively into society. This could particularly affect, say, adult relatives, maybe parents or grandparents of South Asian migrants coming to join family here.
And what about the money side? The minimum income requirement to sponsor family members, that's already gone up recently, hasn't it? Any more changes hinted at?
It has gone up significantly, yes. The white paper doesn't specify further increases right now, but it does suggest we should expect sort of ongoing focus and potential further changes for family visas. It notes that partner visas often lead to settlement, so the requirements there are likely to remain strict.
Okay. And tying back to what we discussed first, this idea of earned settlement and earned citizenship also applies to family roots.
Yes, it seems to be a core principle across the board now. The standard time to qualify for settlement through a family route is also proposed to increase to 10 years. Again, based on this idea of earning the right through contribution over a longer period.
So that 10-year rule applies here too.
Generally, yes. Though, again, they mention the possibility of shorter routes based on exceptional contribution, but 10 years looks like the new default. And citizenship rules will likely follow suit, longer qualifying periods, more emphasis on contribution. They also mention refreshing the Life in the UK test.
Okay. One last area then, offenses and deportation. Any changes proposed there?
Yes, they're looking to expand the grounds for deportation. Currently, it's often tied to getting a prison sentence of a year or more.
Right.
The proposal is that deportation could be considered for all criminal offenses. with a particular focus on serious ones like sexual offenses, even if the sentence isn't that long.
So a much lower threshold for considering deportation.
It seems so. And for people here on shorter-term visas, like students or temporary workers, the message is pretty clear. Commit an offense and you should expect to be deported quickly.
Right, a tougher stance all around on criminality within the immigration system?
That's the clear intention, protecting the public and upholding the integrity of the system.
Okay, wow. We have covered a huge amount of ground there.
Yep.
Just to quickly recap the main points for everyone listening. We've got that much longer 10-year wait for permanent settlement proposed as standard.
Stricter rules for skilled worker visas, pushing towards higher RQF level 6 skills, and ending the salary discount list.
The complete end of overseas recruitment specifically for social care visas with a transition period.
Tighter checks and shorter post-study work options for international students, plus more scrutiny on the universities.
And then broad reforms to family migration, again emphasizing that longer 10-year earned settlement path and integration factors like English language.
And it's pretty clear, isn't it, that many of these changes could really land heavily on British Asians and the wider South Asian community, just given the historical patterns of why people come here, work, study, family, and the sectors many work in, like IT and healthcare.
Absolutely. So for you listening, if these changes might affect you or your family or your community, it's really crucial to think about the potential impacts.
Definitely. And we'd really advise looking for detailed information from official government sources, the gov.uk website, or getting advice from a qualified immigration advisor to see how these proposals might specifically apply to your situation.
Well, that's definitely something to ponder, isn't it? And I know, it's exhausting. Policies like this drop and we feel powerless. But as I said, you're not. Here's what we can do. We can educate ourselves and others, read the white paper, talk about it with your families, your mates, your workplace. Support migrant justice organizations. Group like JCWI, Migrants' Rights Network, and others are doing the legal legwork to fight back legally and politically. Push for accountability. Email your EMP, go to local surgeries, ask questions, demand better. Share your stories, because visibility matters. If you've lived this, talk about it. If you haven't, listen to those who have. If you ever want to talk about it, obviously you can always reach us on our social media at Bold Brown British. I would love to hear your stories and showcase them. And some final thoughts for you. Okay, so 10 years. 10 years to prove you belong. That's what the new policy says. And here's what I say. I think we have always belonged. Whether our parents came on Windrush or a student visa, whether our grandparents fought in British wars or cleaned British streets, whether you were born in Birmingham or Bangalore, our right to exist, to thrive, and to call this land home isn't measured in years. It's not conditional. It is just ours. Because this island is shaped by immigrants. Its flavors, its sounds, its stories, its very soul. And no white paper can whitewash that truth. All right, my beloved samosas, that's all for me today. If this episode stirred something in you, rage, hope, confusion, good. That means you're awake. Stay that way. Until next time, sending you love and spice.
Oh, Mikey, you made it till the end. I'm so happy. Well, listen, if you enjoyed what you heard and you want to hear more, subscribe to the podcast on, well, wherever you're listening to this. We are on Apple, Spotify, Stitcher, Deezer, TuneIn, Alexa, you name it, we're there. So make sure you subscribe so you don't miss out on an episode. We also are on Instagram, which houses loads of behind-the-scenes audio snippets, polls, memes, and ways for you to get involved. So go follow us on Bold, Brown and British. That's the handle. And until next time, keep safe, my wonderful samosas.